Thanks, Kim. Wow, how to introduce these next two readers and writers and teachers. Michael Sage Ricci is a writer, teacher, and visual artist living in Portland, Oregon. He teaches writing workshops locally and internationally with Portland literary arts writers in the school's programs, and with Tom Spanbauer's Dangerous Writing. When not running his private tattoo studio, he is hard at work finishing his first novel, which he will be reading from tonight. And one former Dangerous Writing student described him as the yin to Tom's yang, or maybe he said he was the yang to Tom's yin. I don't remember, something like that. In any case, here is Sage Ricci.
Thanks, Rob. Thank you, San Diego Writers Inc. I like that I'm yin or yang when it doesn't matter which. So I'm reading from my almost hair's breadth away completed novel, The Resurrection of Aquaboy. In the novel, the main character, the novel takes place over a period of 5 or 6 years in the early 80s through the eyes of Oliver Giannetti, very strange, budding homosexual in New Jersey, in the suburban New Jersey. And he has a strange ally in his family. It's the only ally he has in his family, and that's his grandmother, who's this very broken woman, almost incomprehensible, doesn't say much, lives in their basement. Nobody talks to her. She doesn't talk to anybody except him. And in the course of the part I'm going to be reading, we're about 80 pages into the book, and in the course of those 80 pages, Oliver has found a secret room under the front stairs, and in that secret room he's found his grandmother's diaries from the 60s. There's 13 entries, and they take place over 1 year, 1961. And this is a piece from the diary. He calls his Granny Kraken, the monster from the deep. And this piece is the first entry in Granny's diaries. From the diary of Granny Kraken, July 9th, 1961. Truly, I wish to avoid vanity, and I am quite aware of the difference between my writing and how I speak. Honestly, I have found it difficult to speak at all in recent years, and thus the necessity for this diary. As a girl, I loved to write. There was a refuge from my loneliness in language and poems. My big sister Myrna was my whole world. But as we grew into teenagers, we spent less and less time together, and I resented her for it. My friends became Keats and Wordsworth and Robert Frost, all the romance and fancies of a young girl finding poetry. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high over vales and hills. My hope in secondary school was to become an English teacher, but Papa would hear nothing of it. There was no money for college, not right then. The war was about to happen and everyone was afraid. Wait a few years, Bridget, or better yet, find a husband. How dare Papa tell me no? I had been such a good girl, always working to bring in money with my sewing and typing. My anger was pure. Oh, the fights we went round and round on. That was back when I still knew how to fight. And let us not forget all the fuss about Myrna this, Myrna that, Myrna being courted by handsome, rich Albert. My hopes and plans once again came in second, and I knew I had no choice but to follow Papa's wishes. So my fight dried up, and I swallowed that bitter pill down inside and learned all too well how to hide it away. I became so quiet for so long. Until now, this very diary, finally a chance to let it all out. Oh, my sweet, blessed Virgin, I am born anew. Bridget Anastasia Bernard Clancy Falzone. It is so odd to see my name naked on the page like that. The act of writing my name out onto the paper helps me feel so much less alone. The ink is proof that my thoughts exist, proves that I am truly a real person. Oh, Bridget, you silly cow, you are laughable. But there is the miracle in itself, to be able to laugh again, even if only at myself. Lord have mercy, the old girl still has it in her. But it is harder to write than I remember. Of course, back then my hands were fine. I could type as fast as a breeze. That was before the numb came, before it settled into my fingers and my feet all the way. The dead and dying nerves God has cast upon my body. But life had something different in store for me than poetry. Life had Frank Falzone, a husband waiting in the wing whose soul has not an ounce of poetry. We were so young. 20 years ago, young. Kids, that is what we were. Kids playing at love like we played carnival games at San Gennaro Festival. I remember the first time I saw Frank. I had just finished school and needed to right away find work. I applied as a secretary at the Fulton Market in Manhattan. That old building is gone now, knocked down after the war, but you should have seen it back then. One of those old stained buildings you could only find in New York City. A hulking leftover from the last century, a brute and a beast of a building. That's where I first saw Frank. His apron was filthy with fish guts over his wool pants, and that was the first thing I noticed because I thought that would be what Mama noticed. He stood in the street with that foul zone swagger, watching from under his derby cap. Back then, Frank's father, old Eugenio, he still owned the family business, and Frank was his right-hand man. Frank said later he had seen me on the Staten Island ferry days before, and he followed me to see where he worked. He just kept hanging around on his lunch break, hoping to run into me. Frank said he knew I was his from the moment he laid eyes on me. Heaven help me, I was. Myrna knew about Frank right away. Papa and Mama were oblivious. His very first visit to the house, Frank and Papa drank beer on the front porch and talked fish and Manhattan and the market and money, and I think Papa was relieved someone seemed to be taking a real interest in me. Mama did not care for Frank's Italian last name, but the fact of his family money placated her. Myrna was not impressed. A real shark, Myrna said. A hood. Dangerous. But I could not see that then. Dangerous was never leaving Staten Island. Dangerous was the war in Europe. Frank was 4F, and Papa was concerned about that. He would not overlook cowardice or a healthy-looking young man not doing his duty and serving his country. But Frank had a punctured eardrum from an accident as a child. He wanted to enlist and tried, but was 4F in the physical. Just like Frank Sinatra, Frank laughed, and Papa and Mama laughed with him. Everyone knew Frank Sinatra was 4F. Myrna just kept silent, just watching Frank closely. I have learned that about Frank. He usually gets his way. The courtship was short and sweet. Myrna had good company in her disapproval. All of Frank's family seemed to hate me, which was fine, I suppose. I hated them right back. I hated their houses and their fat men drunk on wine in the sitting room while I had to stand in the kitchen being inspected by Frank's mother. Angela Falzone, that wretched, moldy old bitch. Angela and all Frank's sisters and nieces, most of them with mustaches you could see. Lace curtain Irish, Angela pronounced to all the women. That damn smirk never left her mouth. Worse than them shanties. At least the shanties know their place. Don't you try to put on airs with us, girlie. I had never felt such hatred, so blatant and unrestrained. I was marrying her son and she could do nothing about it. I said it before. Frank always gets his way. Marrying Frank got me out from under Papa and Myrna and my sullen, glowering resentment. Marrying Frank got me out of Staten Island. His cousins were finding cheaper houses with more land over in Jersey, and Frank talked about opening his own business away from the city. As if the wedding were not enough for Myrna, the thought of me moving to New Jersey pushed her over the edge. We won't even be allowed to see you over there. I did not care what Myrna thought. Life was always so easy for her. She always knew what she wanted. She always had a vision of the future for herself. Open to change, kiddo. That was her motto. Jump off and don't look back. I jumped and did not look back. I hopped on Frank's train and only looked forward to New Jersey and my own house, a space where I could finally not come in second. And oh, how Myrna burned over it. She has never truly forgiven me. And then, 3 months or so after the wedding, Myrna sent her infamous letter. Stupid wop, she called Frank. A goddamn ape. No, that would be an insult to the apes. She went on, and of course that had to be the one letter Frank got his fish stink hands on. I hid Myrna's letter in the sewing drawer, the notions drawer of Frank's mother's old treadle sewing machine that was my wedding gift. I had not yet learned that there were very few good hiding places from Frank. I had not yet learned that Frank owned me utterly. Frank waited to confront me while I was sewing. I was making my first baby dress. I had just discovered I was pregnant. We didn't know yet it was the twins. I made all of Angela and Mary Claire's baby dresses out of that old soft linen I loved so much. I loved how it would slide so easily through my fingers, the blue and white flower print creased together and held with pins. I did not hear Frank walking up behind me. I sensed nothing amiss when Frank's hands rested on my shoulders. I have learned over the years that when Frank has that strange silence descend on him, that it is a sure sign of trouble. "Hello, dear, how was the train?" I said. I just kept sewing and talking and pumping the treadle. "How was the market?" I did not know it was too late until it was too late. Frank's fingers were getting tighter. They squeezed in with a heavy pressure that would not let up. Ow, Frank, you're hurting me. Funny what we noticed. I knew something was wrong, but all I could see was the pin in the linen stick into my finger. I would not have known if I was not watching it happen because of the numb. A red flower of blood pinpricked from my thumb onto the blue linen, and Frank's hands just squeezed tight. I was pushed down into the chair, immobilized. Then came the questions, and once those questions start, it is already too late, then or now, a course set and unchangeable. Had I noticed the fucking letter was missing from the sewing drawer? Of course I had heard Frank swear before that, but it was never directed towards me, and never with such a blank sound in his voice. A new feeling descended on my body, a cold white fear in my stomach so suddenly. Now we are old friends, that fear and I, but I was different then, a naive girl, and not used to being so scared. I could not even move. Frank started in on me. I worked so hard for you. Do you know what it's like working with my old man? And now I have to come home to my own wife plotting against me. How long has spiteful Myrna been trying to destroy me in your mind? Frank's fingers gripped tighter and tighter and left half-moon fingernail dents that stayed inside the purple bruises on my shoulders for days. That bitch sister of yours is never allowed in my house. You are never allowed to see her again. Do you hear me? Tell me you hear me. Say it. In that moment, Frank became fear to me. I do not mean fearful. I mean fear itself. Fear as a presence in my life, huge and hidden but dangerous. A real hood, Myrna had said. A shark. Frank personified it. And to my shame, I capitulated entirely to him. I kept my eyes closed tight and whispered, "Yes, yes, Frank, yes, I do. I hear you, Frank." I cannot remember Frank leaving. It feels like he held me there for hours, though I know that could not be the case. Sometimes I believe that the bruises from Frank's hand still live there unseen in my shoulders, the dents still pressed deep into my flesh, appearing and disappearing, moving in and out of time like phases of the moon. That was the start of it with Frank, the start of how I got under Frank's surface, how Frank got under mine, before the numb went from my hands and feet all the way to my core. Frank was everywhere, Frank filling my whole world for me, Frank a magic trick. Turn into rye whiskey, turn into beer, turn into drunk more now than not, turn into slaps and pinches and hair pulls. 18 years in our bed turned into an occasional grunt in the middle of the night, and he finds me from behind and enters. I keep my eyes closed, biting my tongue with prayers to the Virgin until it bleeds, and Frank is finished, and maybe it is good to be so numb. Myrna started writing again after a few years. The return address was Sonoma, California. She discovered that she cannot have children. It was a blow at first to both her and Albert, but now it was not so bad and they enjoyed a certain amount of freedom. I could hear a kind tone in her letter, a contrition of sorts. What was I to do? I missed my sister. God forbid Frank found another letter for Myrna in the mail, but I was so alone. My need was greater than my fear. My resolve had to equal my need. So finally, I relented and sent back Myrna a picture of the twins. From then on until now, I have made sure that I am the one who grabs the mail every day. Sorting the mail was already one of my daily chores, so I did not think it would be difficult. And Frank was at the market all day, every day, but for Sundays, when there is no mail anyway. I had a bigger problem to solve in order to keep my secret. Excuse me. I had a bigger problem to solve in order to keep my secret. Where exactly to keep Myrna's letters hidden from Frank? My first thought was the basement. A dark, dank, unfinished storage space of boxes and old furniture, except for one corner where Frank keeps a workbench and all his tools. No, the basement would not do. From the start, anyway, Frank has talked about finishing the basement off proper, and now, all these years later, Frank has finally gotten around to it. He has hired his young cousin Nino, a journeyman carpenter, to do the renovation. No, I hide Myrna's letters in the attic, the one place in the house Frank rarely goes, and then only to make sure the roof fan is working properly. Truly, it is nerve-wracking. I have to position the step ladder beneath the wooden trapdoor in the ceiling of our bedroom closet. Then I must balance on the high